from countless directors coming and going for The Flash, to Ezra Miller and DC Studios' creative differences driving away yet another famous director duo. Here's why the directors of Dungeons & Dragons walked away from The Flash. So, how did they end up directing a movie about a 50-year-old fantasy role-playing game instead of The Flash? Well, it all started with a Cubs game when an agent asked Daly about his career as a filmmaker, and he let slip that they had just walked away from directing the DC movie The Flash. Soon after, Paramount invited both Daly and Goldstein in for a meeting and handed them the script to Dungeons & Dragons. And just like that, they went from superheroes to dragons.
Once the dead man is revived, we can ask him 5 questions, at which point he will die again, never to be re-revived.
Were you killed in the Battle of the Everhorse?
Yes.
4 more questions, right?
Yes.
No, that wasn't for you. Did that count as a question?
Yes.
But let's rewind a bit and talk about The Flash. Now, The Flash has been a roller coaster of a project, with multiple directors hopping on and off over the years. And while the DC tentpole is finally hitting theaters this summer under new directors, fans can't help but wonder what could have been the issues with the previous directors. Plus, they had been working on the project for over a year. The duo was originally hired to write the script for the film, but they ultimately left due to creative differences. In an interview, they mentioned that they had pitched an idea of a ground-level superhero where it isn't entirely end-of-the-world stakes.
I want you to listen to me, Barry, because I mean this.
Where our Scarlet Speedster is just learning his powers and is also somewhat dysfunctional with his life. In their minds, the more imperfect a superhero, the better, because that's the real challenge. I mean, how do you give imperfection to someone who's, physically perfect? But unfortunately, Miller and the studio's direction was rather intense and bright, as the directors put it. So it became clear that Miller had a different vision for the movie than they did. And get this, Ezra even wrote a rival version of the script with Grant Morrison, which the studio ultimately passed on. By now, it was clear that the higher-ups didn't approve of their vision, so naturally they left because they realized they couldn't win this battle. I mean, it's better to cut your losses and get out of there when you know you can't win, right? And hey, you can't blame them for wanting to make a movie they're passionate about.
My name is Kara.
We're Barry.
But ultimately, Andy Muschietti and Christina Hodson took over the project and got it to a green light. Now, despite their differences, Goldstein and Daly still have a story by credit on the film and even got to screen it. And they do say that they're happy with how it turned out, mostly because the new directors took inspiration from their ideas. Goldstein praised the final product, saying, "They took what we started and ran with it and made it a very fun and emotional movie." The Flash is set to hit theaters on June 16th, and while we're all excited to see what Muschietti and Hodson have in store for us, I believe I speak for everyone when I say I can't help but wonder what it could have been with Goldstein and Daly's vision. Would it have been a more grounded, character-driven film? Or would it have ultimately fallen flat without the big-budget spectacle we've come to expect from superhero movies? Regardless, it's clear that The Flash has been a long and difficult journey to the big screen. But if the final product is as fun and emotional as Goldstein says it is, then it might just be worth the wait.
Tell me something. You can go anywhere. Another timeline.
One of the key aspects the filmmakers say they strove to bring to The Flash was a character-driven story that doesn't get overwhelmed by the source material. He even said that he's not a huge superhero guy. Sure, he collected comics as a kid and enjoys the Marvel movies, but what hooks him in is the story and the people in it. They applied this to the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons movie too. Picture this, 2 grown men reminiscing about their teenage years when they spent countless hours playing D&D. Fast forward to the present day, and these 2 men are now successful filmmakers, tasked with turning their beloved game into a major motion picture. But how do they make it accessible to those who aren't diehard fans? That was the question on their minds as they embarked on this journey. They knew that they had to broaden the appeal of the film beyond just the game, because there's this stigma that you have to get over that this isn't just for the nerds. And they're right.
We made this movie to appeal to everybody, regardless of whether you know anything about Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, John played more recently, I played as a kid, but really, we wanted to make sure that there was nothing no barriers to entry, so that we don't expect you to come in here with any knowledge.
I mean, until recently, D&D has been seen as a niche interest, reserved for a select few. But with the rise of fantasy and sci-fi in popular culture, now is the perfect time to introduce a wider audience to the world of D&D. At first, they considered making the film about people playing the game, but they quickly abandoned that idea after the release of Jumanji: The Next Level, which explored similar territory. Also, it does a little bit of a disservice, because, you see, it reduces Dungeons & Dragons to just a game, and they think that there's so much that can be explored within that world. So instead, the filmmakers decided to let the action of the story be conveyed by the open-ended nature of how players approach the game. They wanted to capture the spirit of creative exploration that is at the heart of D&D. One of the challenges of adapting a game like this into a movie is that the characters are often created by the players themselves. In the game, you can be whoever you want to be: a dwarf, a wizard, a rogue, or anything in between. So how do you create compelling characters for a movie when the possibilities are endless? Well, they found a way to honor the spirit of the game while still crafting characters that audiences will care about. In other words, the characters in the movie try to figure their way through an elaborate campaign, just like the players do in the game. This approach allowed them to capture the essence of D&D while still making a movie that stands on its own. Of course, the process of bringing it to the big screen didn't come without its challenges, but they both credit the studio and brand holders for allowing them to preserve their vision throughout the process, unlike DC Studios. As for whether or not the movie will appeal to a wider audience beyond the game, the directors are working on capturing the excitement and creativity, while also crafting a compelling and entertaining story that would resonate with anyone who enjoys action, adventure, and fantasy. To achieve this, the filmmakers got their hands on an awesome cast. This includes Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and Hugh Grant, all the people who bring their unique talents and perspectives to the movies they star in. And they made sure to infuse the story with plenty of humor and heart, creating characters that audiences will care about and root for. At the same time, they also knew that they had to balance the demands of the source material with the requirements of a cinematic narrative. Again, just like what they were trying to do with The Flash. That means they didn't sacrifice the core elements that make D&D so special. To that end, the filmmakers took a page from the game itself, allowing the story to unfold in an organic and collaborative way, while also pushing the boundaries of what was possible within the medium of film. So, whether you're a longtime D&D fan or a newcomer to the world of fantasy and adventure, the movie promises to be an unforgettable cinematic experience, full of heart, humor, and excitement. So mark your calendars and gather your adventure party. That's it for me about why the Dungeons & Dragons directors walked away from The Flash.